to Europe the occult traditions of the Orient, the Arabic astrologers, the Sufi mystics, the sex magic of the Orient, and all these high traditions that they brought back, and they were transmitted to the secret, the real occult societies of Europe, which had to be completely underground, and were fighting for
the Trilateral Commission, essentially.
Well, I mean, on one level, on the lower level, this became all the witchcraft and the weird sort of occultist that a lot of people came to associate with that. But on the pure level that it evolved out of, it took the highest occult sort of spiritual secrets and practices from the Middle East that they got from making peace with their enemies in Jerusalem, where they took their name from being the Knights Templars, the guardians of the temple. They were the knights that took over the temple in Jerusalem, then made peace with the highest faction of also the renegade faction of the Arabs, who said, "Hey, who are we fighting for? So that the Arab rulers can get all the power. So that and Jacques Desmoulins, the Knights Templars, said, "Hey, are we doing all this so that the anti-pope and the King of France, King Philip of France, can get all?" They went back, and King Philip and the anti-pope demanded everything that they got. Demanded that they swear allegiance to them, give up all their money, take vows of poverty, and in effect go out and rob and loot from them and be their tax collectors.
That's right.
And so they burned Jacques Desmoulins at the stake and killed, tortured all these knights and stuff, which had brought back the highest secrets from the Orient, which most people still don't know. And it's only because of all the things.
No, the Masons know.
They know a little. Most of the Masons have no. Most of the Masons only know the pure Masonic tradition, which is just the inkling of the iceberg.
But that's just there's
a lot in there.
Only because there are so many of them now.
I know.
When they started out,
they started out in this country, Washington and Jefferson and Franklin. Those guys all knew all these traditions. Sure,
that's right.
They didn't write them all down. They kept them all secret in
secret society. That's right.
But it led their actions in even conceiving the natural order of inalienable rights of man and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and actually gave them the strength to put together a group that would fight for those rights. Anyway, still haven't made it through these. Number 15. All Rainbow Peace Projects should do outreach in their regions to share any viable positive alternatives that can benefit local folks and the environment. So these are all pretty basic, but if you don't have them there for people,
they're right there.
Guidelines. Number 16, which is the reason I was sort of going into all this, is it is agreed that the definition of consensus used by Rainbow Peace Projects International is the common agreement by 2/3 or more of all participants actively involved.
That's the kicker, isn't it?
For further info on Rainbow Peace Projects International, contact Rainbow Hawk Nap, drawer B, number 84A0, that is, 400, that is, 5. 84A0405, Stormville, New York, 12582-0010, USA. Okay, and now that we've gone through that, we'll get back to the letter, and we'll get back to a little more of the discussion of consensus and history of the rainbow a little bit, and some of the darker side of the games that are going on. And
well, let's go back again because in the middle of that you again gave a speech. Where were just for history? The first rainbow gathering was where? And on.
Oh, that got cut off before. Okay.
That got cut off.
Just for the record, we'll cover where the rainbow gatherings were, and some of that will be talked about a bit here and in passing. But there were some rainbow councils, which Rainbow Hawk says he was at, the one that actually brought together the Vortex Gathering. It was sort of a coalition that it came out of the original Rainbow councils on the West Coast that put together a little gathering in connection with the Vietnam Veterans Against the War and some other groups at that time. That it was not a specifically political action, but everything we did was political in 1971. Your lifestyle was alternative.
In 1971 was a Vortex Gathering.
Yes, in 1971 in Oregon was the Vortex 1 gathering. I guess there were other Vortex gatherings, but out of that Vortex 1 gathering, which itself came out of the original Rainbow Council,
What was the original Rainbow Council? Is that explained in there?
It's mentioned briefly, and I wasn't at that, and I just know that there were a couple of councils, a few councils by groups on the West Coast, including Oregon and Northern California and Santa Cruz, I think at different times. They called themselves a Rainbow or Rainbow Family, or that put together this Vorpal, that helped put together this Vorpal.
Do you know the first people that were there?
I know some of them, and Rainbow Hawk was one of them.
Rainbow Hawk was there.
Yes. Okay. So I don't know all the details, so I can't really say about all that. And can we go back to some of that later? Because
okay.
It's not really that's the prehistory, and it's not. It was not really called the Rainbow itself. You can say started at Vorpal 1, although you can't say Vorpal happened by itself.
It didn't happen by itself.
Everything that had been going on in the U.S. from at least '65 on contributed to the Vorpal gathering being in Oregon.
The question I wanted.
Early summer of 1971.
The question I wanted. Where did the people come from that called the first Rainbow Council, or whatever it was, whether they called themselves Rainbow or not? The people who got together to say, we are a council, or we are counseling, where did those people come from? Were they upper middle class? Were they middle class people? Were they poor people? Were they, and we're talking generalities because we don't know their individual. I have to talk to this guy to know that, and he would tell me.
Well, on one level, you can't. There were these councils of people that came together that before this Vortex gathering, it started calling themselves sort of, and it was pretty vague then.
Who were they that were taking this upon themselves to?
Who were the thousands and even millions of people that we had in the streets protesting the war? A little before that, they were from all walks of life.
No. At this time,
this was 1971. In 1971, we had 1 million people in Washington from all walks of life and stuff. But most of the people, had been.
2 years before that, they were almost 100% students, which is upper middle class.
Most of these people were originally sort of upper middle class students that dropped out and started becoming a countercultural alternative lifestyle.
Well educated.
Well, to some extent, but not necessarily. I also marched in the streets at those times with people from working class, factory backgrounds, intellectuals, poets, professors. There are
upper middle class.
There are people still teaching at MIT, respected professors who marched with me in the streets in 1969, 70, and 71.
Yes.
In Boston, Washington, and other places.
Right.
And Leon Robinson, for instance, is coming back to give a lecture in a few days. Who was there then? Who I took a course from?
We accept that. We accept that.
So they were from all walks of life, but I'd say basically you're right. Most of them were previously in the previous couple of years.
Forget the upper middle class. We're all lower class except for the top people. We'll get away from the class.
Okay, well, let's
go to education.
I can't really talk myself before the vortex gathering. Okay. I think you shouldn't press me for the early details.
No, I wasn't going for details.
We'll have to go to Rainbow.
I was asking for generalities.
Okay.
Okay. Drug users?
Not necessarily. Yes.
Reefer smokers? That's what I'm talking. Reefer acid.
Yes and no. I mean, as at other different periods, a lot of people were using a lot of different things at different times, and I don't think that you can.
This was one.
Generally, I would say most of them then, and most Rainbow people now consider marijuana, especially, to be a sacrament, and an herb, and a medicine.
Okay. I'm looking for.
And the ones that don't particularly, I think, respect other people's right to use it as a sacrament and herb and medicine.
It takes consensus to block it, so we're in trouble.
But I don't think that you can make any particular generalities about what people do or do. It was the whole point of the people that came to call themselves Rainbow was that they espoused, like the colors of the rainbow, they cover the whole spectrum of possible beliefs, and there's room for everything.
Were they natural leaders? Were they a gathering or a council of natural leaders, people who had people who followed them, thought of them as gurus, but that's a little bit heavy.
Yes and no. See, we'll get into a little bit in a minute. That's part of what
Well, that's now.
Well, this goes back to there. See, he's talking about some of the same people that were involved that were at the Vorpal gathering.